Hello. Arsenal won, Manchester City won. Looked like Manchester City were heading back to the northwest with all 3 points for the first time since 2023. But a sting in the tail, Gabriel Martinelli off the bench and into the back of the net in
Mm.
stoppage time for Arsenal. 1-1 at the Emirates. Mark Donaldson, Shaka Hislop. Shaq, what's the headline from this game? Because there's a lot of little narratives, but it's like a role reversal of
Yeah,
sorts. What,
I,
what
I,
did you make of it?
I agree. I think that that's the headline. That's a big takeaway from this, and what otherwise has been a stalemate, one that probably um, benefits Liverpool the
Hmm.
most.
Yep.
I'm not sure when we ever anticipated discussing a Manchester City that was happy to have. I'll be honest, as we sit right now, I'm not sure what their possession was. If it's a lot more than 35% over the course of the game.
33% Shaka.
There you go. I would have been surprised and happy to play that way. On the other, you've got an Arsenal who dominated possession, dominated touches in the opponent's box, but before the goal, largely, Donnarumma had a couple of good saves to make. I was about to say was untroubled, but he made a couple of very good saves, and maybe those saves were a bit better than um, it kind of impressed me as just because of how good Donnarumma is
Mhm.
to the average goalkeeper. It would have been much more. It would have seemed a whole lot more difficult and maybe stood out a whole lot more. Um, Set pieces again, Arsenal were strong, but I thought Donnarumma for the most part competed um, very well in a way that you've not seen many goalkeepers in the Premier League do. And again, that's just testament to his kind of physical presence. But keep in mind that was one of the big complaints of about him at PSG, that he just didn't deal with balls into the box and in particular set pieces very well. But I thought he did so wonderfully well today for Manchester City. Other than that, as I say, the kind of big takeaway is, when did when did everybody convince Pep Guardiola and City that they were a team that just gave up possession and counter-attacked? And credit to Arteta and Arsenal for the way they dominated. But still, I felt by way of clear-cut chances, they were few and far between. Upset Martinelli with a fantastic finish. Let's give him his credit.
It was, and we'll talk plenty about that and Erling Haaland's opening goal.
Mhm.
Before we get to the game, what about the team selection from both managers? Pretty rare for Pep to name an unchanged lineup. For Arsenal, Marino got the nod in midfield once again, but it was Trossard preferred on the left-hand side of the attack and Eberechi Eze on the bench. What did you make of the respective lineups?
Um, well, from City, since you started with them, fair. I understand, and no real surprises. Kind of going into this one, I always wanted to see how City would fare, in particular their wing backs up against
Mm.
Arsenal wingers. Now, I didn't expect Trossard to get the nod ahead of Eze on the left hand side. Madueke, who's been outstanding form on the right hand side, I thought he was very good yet again. But but they largely weren't troubled in those wide areas. Um, Bernardo Silva, I thought was very good again, and not often you say that Bernardo Silva kind of does a job defensively, but I thought he coped wonderfully well with everything that Arsenal had to throw at him. Erling Haaland continues to prove to be this incredible finisher. I mean, when that goal coming on 9 minutes, I can't tell you how impressed I was and how I was
Mm.
crowing about it here at home. He just makes us look so simple. He makes finishing look so simple. And listen, I get it. He run past a back four from deep. There are many strikers who do that, find themselves 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper. There are many strikers who find themselves in that position and finish. But so often we're talking about when you're 1-on-1, the, the striker's shape of the body, what he's showing in terms of putting the goalkeeper off. Erling Haaland is just simple as it comes. Ball in, take a good first touch, put it in the bottom corner. Nothing more to it. He just makes finishing look so simple. Um, but I thought the man of the match for me was Doku, who continues to, I think he's been the real bright spark for Manchester City this season. At times, he was the only out ball. Now, I know the long ball over the top to Erling Haaland is always on, but more times than not, 9 times out of 10, it was to those wide areas for Doku to chase, for Doku just to hold up and take defenders on and bring the likes of Erling Haaland um, and Reinders and everybody else into the game. I thought he was simply outstanding. Man of the match for me, as I say. So there were some questions, well, not many questions about Manchester City starting lineup. I did question Trossard getting the nod, and then when they find themselves 1-0 down at half time and Arteta's forcing them making changes, and I totally understand you're bringing on Bukayo Saka, I understand you're bringing on Eze, but I thought Madueke was probably the most productive Arsenal player in the first 45. So while things worked out for Arsenal in the second half, so I guess I can't question Arteta's changes that much. I just kind of looking at how the teams came off the second half, I was surprised to see Madueke get the hook.
He made a couple of changes at half time, Mikel Arteta. They're 1-0 down. You've well described City's opening goal. It's a brilliant through ball from Reinders and then a fantastic finish and the strength. And by the way, the Arsenal defenders, the centre backs, are really quick and he's still
Yeah,
able to get
yeah,
there. So that was outstanding. But the changes at half time, the reason I asked you about the Arsenal starting lineup, he's kind of gone with three defensive midfielders at home. He's got
yeah.
Marino, he's got Zubimendi, and he's got Rice. And it was a lot of the ball, but doing very little with it. It was just possession for possession's sake. And City defending, which they did pretty well, looked relatively comfortable as the first half came to a conclusion. So then at halftime, Saka's not got 90 in him, so he's got 45.
Right.
But Eze came on as well. What difference did you see from Arsenal after those halftime changes? And what differences did you see from City's shape and where they defended in the second half prior to the equaliser?
Well, I thought the changes were understandable. The starting lineup was, and I don't really have any complaint about the three defensive midfielders. In that, I thought City just defended deep, far deeper than I expected them to, and maybe Mikel Arteta similarly. But they dominated possession. They dominate, and they don't have that creativity of an Odegaard, that passing creativity of an Odegaard because of his injury. You've got pretty similar players in Saka and Eze who are on the bench, pretty similar to Madueke and Trossard, who want to take defenders on one, who want to get the ball to feet, square up with their defender and take them for a run. So in terms of the changes or maybe starting lineup, I don't have much of a complaint. I don't have much of a complaint about the changes, other than, as I say, I thought Madueke was arguably Arsenal's
Mm.
best player in the first half. So I'm not sure why he got the hook, but he's playing on the right hand side. You want to bring Bukayo Saka in. I thought there was no drop off in that regard on the right hand side. So again, I can't be overly critical of that at all. But that's where kind of the Arsenal's limitation stopped, in that they don't have that attacking midfielder to sit in the hold. And as a matter of fact, the goal comes when Eze drops a little bit deep and
Mhm.
picks out an incredible ball over the top to Martinelli. So Eze provided some of that creativity from a little bit deeper that maybe Odegaard normally would have. We normally expect Eze to be drifting out on the left hand side. Again, Trossard occupied there. But I thought Eze did that well. And to be honest, if I am hypercritical of Eberechi Eze, the first meaningful bit of action in the course of the game, and ultimately it was the defining moment, certainly for Arsenal's second half.
I don't know the actual number, but it's got to be quite high. The number of times that you and I have sat here on ESPN FC and spoken about Arsenal's need to sign a striker. They
Yeah.
finally signed the striker, but have they signed an elite striker?
Well, the short answer to that, the easy or lazy answer to that, I guess, is we'll see at the end of the season. No, and I hold my hand up. I've been critical of Gyökeres quite a lot during the course of this season. I was critical after the Leeds game where I thought his mobility, his pace just wasn't what it needed to be to be that leading striker for Arsenal in terms of a significant title challenge during the course of this season. But he scored 2 goals against Leeds that day, albeit one of them being a penalty. I had a similar concern, but again, you look at the game against Forest where he took his goal wonderfully well. And if you look at Arsenal, particularly last season, their title challenge came unstuck with just too many draws. Too many draws against teams a little bit lower down in the table. So maybe that's the difference that he brings to Arsenal. That goal that we saw against Forest, that brace that we saw against Leeds. Maybe that's where Gyökeres makes the difference for Arsenal in being in the right place at the right time against those teams that Arsenal against those teams who sit deep and just hope for a draw. Too many of them came away with draws against Arsenal last season, as I mentioned. So maybe that's the difference. But against a defense like City's, against a defense of top teams, both in the Premier League and in Europe, I'm not sure that Gyökeres is the answer. I'm not sure that Gyökeres is the difference. Now, that being said, we are talking about an incredibly talented Arsenal side, as we mentioned, whether we're talking some of their attacking players or how good they are from set pieces. So maybe that's where they get the most joy against the Cities and the Liverpools and the Atletico Madrids and whoever else I have no idea who they come up against in in the Champions League. But maybe that's where they see the difference. But on days like today, you have to say, well, service wasn't there, and maybe a lot of that was down to how deep City defended. It I honestly can't think of anything that Gyökeres did to stand out, to discuss, to critique.
76th minute, one or two eyebrows raised when Erling Haaland was taken off, replaced
Yeah,
by Nico Gonzalez. However, let's put this into context. He never stopped running. He was
yeah.
one of City's best defenders from set plays. He took his goal brilliantly. He led the line very, very well indeed. I just sense he's added that little bit more to his game, whether it's Pep or him or whatever, since last season, which was a down season by his own admission. But today, I mean, look, you would have wanted him as a neutral to play the full game, but he got 76 minutes, and I thought his work rate was absolutely outstanding.
Absolutely fantastic. And I think missed in those last 14
Yeah,
plus
he
7
was.
minutes injury time. In that, as City got deeper, of course, there's more room in behind behind the Arsenal defense. As City got deeper, Arsenal got more. I don't want to say desperate. That's not the right word, but of course they would take more chances going forward. So while I understand, or I'm trying to understand and be sympathetic with taking Erling Haaland off, I just wondered if that would have been those moments, those closing moments, is where Erling Haaland would have been at his absolute best. Now, as we were watching here in the US and in their commentary, the suggestion was that Doku was going to come off. Again, even that, I was like, are you really going to take Doku off? I thought he had been Manchester City's best player all day long. So it really could have gone either way. You could have taken off Bernardo Silva and allowed Doku and Erling Haaland to almost be a front two. With again Doku continue to be the outball and Haaland providing that support. So I question that, particularly late on. Now, again, if they'd held out, you say Pep gets this absolutely right. But the fact that they didn't, now those same questions that kind of hit me on the 76th minute remain probably more relevant now.
Played 5, won 2, drawn 1, lost 2. Yes, they faced Arsenal away. Yes, they've had Manchester United, and yes, they've faced Spurs, but they lost at Brighton. Regardless of that late equaliser from Arsenal, would that have kind of changed the narrative in your mind of how City have started the season if they'd taken 3 points today compared with only taking a point because they conceded late?
No, and I say that because I think the difference in narrative about Manchester City, in fact, the entire narrative about Manchester City this season is how different they are, how
Yeah.
willing they are to concede possession to the opponent, how much more reliant they are on the counter attack. That's who City have become, and now. Again, I have a tendency to see things through a goalkeeper's lens, given my own history. I question the signing of Donnarumma because he doesn't play the ball with his feet. And as I mentioned earlier, there were huge question marks about him in Paris in terms of his aerial ability and dealing with set pieces. We saw him deal with arguably the best team from set pieces in the league. I thought he did so wonderfully well. There were a couple of moments that were a little bit nervy, but I thought he did so wonderfully well. Truth is, when the ball came back to his feet, it was a little that had you equally nervy, and you weren't quite sure where the ball would go with that. Um, but somehow City have made that or this version of themselves work. So we question a lot about City, kind of thinking about who they were or who they have been under Pep Guardiola up until now. I think that's changed. I think
Mm.
who they will be going forward has changed. I don't expect to see City go back to, and don't get me wrong, maybe at some point this season they will enjoy 70, 80% possession against teams lower down in the table. But against better teams in the league, I don't expect City to have, 70, 80% possession as we'd grown accustomed to them
Mhm.
doing, even against the best in England, the best in Europe. That version of City is no more. So we have to try to find a gauge, a measure of Manchester City against this version of themselves, because I think the old version, um, Pepper's moved past now.
They would have been fifth if they'd held on to that victory over Arsenal. They would have been level with Crystal Palace,
Mm.
but they still would have been 6 points behind Liverpool. They're now 8 points behind Liverpool. So the title race has how many teams in it? And is one of those teams Manchester City?
Well, I think this early in the season, it's wrong. You can't rule out Manchester City, even though they're what would you say, 8 points behind Liverpool. And while Liverpool have started wonderfully well, their performances have not been great themselves. We've made that comment about them. I still feel that both Liverpool and Manchester City can improve significantly. The difference for Manchester City is that improvement comes so will the consistency and the points. For Liverpool, that improvement comes, but they've they've already started so well this season. So it's difficult to say. It's difficult to say who gets the better of Liverpool. I want to feel that Liverpool um, get significantly better, far more consistent. And I know I'm talking about a team that's 100%, but we're talking about performances. Surely this poor performances, but winning games can't be sustained. So I'm kind of going around the hedges here, trying to figure out exactly how many teams are in this title race. I still think there are three. I still think Manchester City are in it, but let's be honest about it. They've stumbled out of the blocks, Manchester City. If we liken this to a 100-meter race, they have stumbled out the blocks. You can't often stumble out the blocks and hope to win a top level 100-meter race. Um, but they're still in it right now. It's about Liverpool. It's about Arsenal. Manchester City are just hoping to get some kind of win behind their backs.
Yeah, City have lost 5 points already this season. We've only played 5 games from winning
Mm,
positions. Only Brentford have lost more points, and that was 8. And there's always something like City this year from winning positions. Last year it was Arsenal and draws, and that stopped them
mhm.
from being better in the title race. You can't be in winning positions and concede as many points, because if that continues, you can forget about the title.
Correct.
Let's wrap up with Arsenal. Now, it's a good point for them in the end. And there's no point in saying, well,
In
if
the
they
end.
hadn't have scored,
In the
what
end.
would have
Correct.
happened? Because they did score, right? So whether it's getting
Hmm.
themselves out of jail, they probably deserved the point. But for all the
They did.
possession, and we spoke about that at the start, okay? It was 2/3 of possession that they had. A lot of that possession was it was consequential possession. It wasn't aggressive possession in the final third. So they've got another tough one. They've had a tough start to the season, and they're still in a very good position. They're second. They go to Newcastle next week. So they've got easier games after that coming up. Where are we right now with Arsenal, with Shaka coming back, with Odegaard still to come back, with threats now in attack to score goals? Are they where Mikel Arteta wants them to be, do you think?
I would think so. I think this version of Arsenal is a whole lot better than last year's version, and maybe and that's just in the things that they do well. And maybe the difference between this season and last, in terms of where they finish on the table, as we mentioned, is Gyökeres getting the right positions, finding finishes against those teams lower down in the table who want to sit a little bit deeper and make things a little bit more difficult for Arsenal, who maybe don't have the defending kind of understanding and discipline and personnel that Manchester City do. So maybe that's where Gyökeres comes in and makes a difference. But there's no question that this is a far better squad in totality than it was last year. They can absorb a Bukayo Saka injury because of Madueke's performances. I still think will come a whole lot better. I was as I mentioned, a little surprised to see him come off the bench. But he has the ability to take games by the absolute scruff of the neck like nobody else. So you feel that is going to play to his and to Arsenal's benefit as well. If they get Odegaard back and they have that creativity from sitting just behind their front man, then again, this is a very good Arsenal team. They are right in this, and while I think the goal today makes it feel a little bit different. It's 2 points dropped, but it's not a bad 2 points dropped, if I can say that. So they are in a very, very good position. I feel they will continue to push Liverpool at the top of this table.
So Arsenal 1, Manchester City 1. We're now going to do an hour on both Newcastle, Shaq.
Well, just give me a call when you're finished, Mark, because I do not know where to start, what the middle is, or where do I finish on this one. Newcastle go away to Bournemouth, pick up a point in a 0-0. That's all I got. The next 59 minutes and 30 seconds are all yours, Mark.
I'll give them back to those that want them, and I'll say that Sunderland drew with Aston Villa and Ronaldo got sent off, and I won't even ask you about that one. It's just like, and make sure you wrap up the other two games today. That's us. We've wrapped up the other two games.
That's as good. We've done a better job than I think those games deserved.
Let's just wrap it up by saying this: Bournemouth are in a Champions League spot right now. Sunderland are contending for a European spot, and Villa will be playing Championship football next season if the league finished after 5 games. Plenty more action still to come, but no more reaction about Bournemouth against Newcastle. If that was in my back garden, I would have closed the curtains. That's all you need to know about that game. Bye-bye, everyone. See you soon.